views and opinions expressed on this show by its guests are not necessarily those of Lounge Media Group or the show host. So if you sue someone, make sure it's the party responsible for hurting your feelings. Also, grow up, be an adult, and understand not everyone thinks like you. And that's okay.
All right, good day. How's it going, everybody? So we're here tonight. Special guests of the Logistics Lounge, Hunter and Pedro Potato, have once again opened up their studio for us to pontificate aloud about issues in the trucking business. And we had a pretty major W today. President Trump signed an executive order with verbiage in it that seems to indicate that they are overturning a 2016 FMCSA memorandum, which directed the DOT, state DOT, and enforcement officers to not enforce federal regulations regarding English proficiency. And if you look in the exact wording of President Trump's executive order, it quotes a major issue brought about by guests that are here with us. We got Shannon Everett and Harvey Beach here from American Truckers United, whose research and advocacy seems to have gone directly to the top and, quoted directly in the executive order, their verbiage and the way they've framed this. This is a big win for the American trucking community and for the safety of motorists here in the United States of America. And Shannon and Harvey are here with us, along with Justin Super Trucker Martin, and a friend of my podcast and a colleague and researcher on autonomous trucks, which we'll also get into a little bit, Mr. James Year. We're all here. How's it going, everyone?
Going great.
Glad to be here. What a great day.
Yes, it's been very, very busy. Shannon and myself were also guests on Steve Bannon's show again today, so that was interesting.
Yeah, I think today is a huge victory for everybody. It's a victory for our American truck drivers. It's a victory for American workers. It's a victory for everybody driving on our roadways. But there's still a lot of work to do. Our industry's a mess right now, and so this is a good step. We are very grateful. We are encouraged, but we know there's still a lot of work to do.
Yeah, it seems like it's only the beginning. We know that we're not the only people paying attention to this. I see that the American Trucking Association put out a statement here a little while ago. OIDA, who are on our side of the street with this. I want to highlight the American Trucking Association, who very sneakily sent in a letter to Secretary Duffy, which basically lifted all of these issues straight out of your guys' white paper and letter you had sent to Secretary Duffy a little while ago. And it seems like they were trying to head something off at the pass or, otherwise get out ahead of this. What do you think about the ATA cribbing your guys' stuff?
Well, we know from personal experience that they are not fans of English proficiency. They're not fans of limiting, restricting, or banning non-domiciled CDLs. They're not fans of limiting, restricting, or banning foreign CDLs. And so it is interesting that in the 11th hour of the legislation that we were working on in the state of Arkansas, that they amended their bill, HB 1745, in committee in the judiciary to include English proficiency. And we really believe that's because we were giving them so much hell about how egregious and outrageous it was for them to be allowing this on our highways, that they really had to cave on that. I think they come under a lot of pressure from the legislators during those hearings to say, hey, we need to at least be doing this. And so at a minimum, they were forced to cave on English proficiency. We want to see them cave on non-domicile CDLs. We want to see them cave on foreign CDLs, and we intend to keep the heat on them, keep the pressure up.
Mr. Beach, do you have anything to add to that, sir?
Yeah, I do. They got caught. They got caught. When we come across their advisement and found out that their advisement really was the seed that started the non-domiciled CDL phenomenon, and I guess that advisement also was just hand and foot with the Biden trucking action plan. They got caught, and I don't remember how many days it was after we had been on the Will Kane show, but it wasn't too many days after that is when they issued that letter. So they've been complicit in all of it, and I've been a member. I've been a due paying member for many years, and I want my money back. I want to know where they were in 2016. Why was no one notified of that memo in 2016? But Gord, I think I mentioned this to you yesterday. If I would have known about the Biden action plan, I would have sold my business. I would not have stayed in it. I've got 4 kids, and we're in it for the long haul. But if my advocate, that's supposed to be my watcher on the wall, and it's not just me, it's all of the mid-size carrier members, we're supposed to have some watchers on the wall. That's what we're paying dues for. Is they're the ones that have all the time to stay up with any issues that are going on and any new policies. But the American Trucking Association, in my opinion, had been taken over by the uber elite shippers with the private fleets that obviously do not have the best interests of the small, mid-size, and some large. I mean, a 1,500 truck operation is not a quote-unquote mid-size carrier, in my opinion. That is a very large carrier. But there's nobody at the American Trucking Association that's represented what I would consider, blue-collar, grassroots, American legacy truckers for a long time, because they've been infiltrated and taken over, particularly in Arkansas. They're definitely controlled by large corporate interests. But across the country, in Washington, in my opinion, I think Amazon has played a major part in pushing those non-domiciled CDLs. Although it is a suspicious coincidence that that advisement letter was in late 2019. That was telling everybody to use the non-domiciled CDLs for non-citizens, and we just so happen to see that J.B. Hunt's Power Only 360 box was started in 2019 as well. So, we really don't know who all was in on it, but we know there wasn't a bunch of people like us in on it. That's for sure.
Yeah. So for those listening, I had Harvey on my podcast. We recorded, I don't know if I would call it an emergency podcast, but Harvey's been a little bit ahead of the curve with paying attention to where all these issues intersect with finance and other things that happened at the same time the Biden trucking action plan got laid out as the COVID demand spike hit in 2021. And you should go listen to that. Go to autonomoustruckers.substack.com or Voice of Gord on any of your favorite podcast platforms. And Harvey lays out quite well how the greed heads in the world of finance were issuing loans for trucks that were way overvalued at interest rates that were 3 times as normal. And now there's a whole bunch of carriers out there running around with trucks that are underwater and finance companies that don't want to repossess them because they don't want to go underwater. And the whole thing is just like a repeat of 2008, except with trucks instead of real estate. Harvey made a very compelling case for what's going on there. Extremely interesting. You should go check that out. Harvey also brought up Amazon, and I want to bring James into this because you've been doing some really good research on what's going on with autonomous technology, and I don't think Amazon's come in for enough criticism on this, right? Like they've been coming in for lots of criticism from Shannon and Harvey and myself and everyone else about their use and abuse of third-party contractors hauling their freight very cheaply and then getting in tons of accidents. In the last 10 years, they've been involved in incidents that have killed over 140 motorists. We know all about that, but they're also, very quietly getting involved with autonomous driverless trucks. And maybe you could speak to that a little bit for us.
Yeah, so whenever you're talking about Amazon and any sort of capacity and hauling freight between first mile, last mile, middle mile, anything like that, like they've got the worst safety record in the entire business. Like it's even so far, it's even to the point where, like, I think it was about 3 years ago, there was a delivery driver hauling Amazon packages that ran over and killed their director of safety for Amazon. Like that's how bad it is. Like I might be a little bit fuzzy on the details as regarding like what that person's specific title was and what the circumstances are of that, but they basically whip people with a digital whip and get as much productivity as they possibly can out of them. As far as the immigration stuff is concerned, I'm not super specific on what the data is regarding where the drivers are from that they're hiring. But they've got their Amazon Relay service, which, from my understanding of, is more of a load board type of a situation. But everything else that's structured with Amazon is within that DSP network type of thing. So delivery service partners, where Amazon doesn't really technically own or operate anything. It's all third-party contractors. Where if anything happens, like say in Texas, they just slash the contract and they solve themselves a liability. So that's basically the business model and the high end that we're dealing with as far as Amazon is concerned. And they are a huge player in the parcel market. I don't see that changing, and I don't see any accountability happening for that because, again, we're talking about a massive monopoly that has insane amounts of power with that. So, Gord, did I answer your question with that, or do you want me to elaborate any more on any specific aspect?
No, I mean, well, there's that whole deal with Plus AI, right? Like they're testing this, and I spoke with this about you on the phone, and I think it might be useful to, because it seemed like my guess, and you showed me that I was wrong, was that Amazon has this history of using sort of bottom feeder carriers through their load boards. And they're doing this in part because it gives them a buffer of that accountability, right? Like someone gets in an accident, people are killed. Amazon can say, hey, that's these guys with their own MC number, wash their hands of it. It's not their problem. And so if they had all of their own autonomous trucks going and it's Amazon's name on it and Amazon owns the autonomous trucks, then there's like they lose that step of, liability deflection. And I was hoping you could maybe talk about that real quick, like where they're at with Plus AI and what their sort of game plan is there.
So like as far as like what their game plan is, so Amazon has, if my memory serves, 5% stake in Aurora, and back in 2021, Amazon bought or placed an order for 1,000 of Plus AI's autonomous retrofit, like I believe it's the SL1 kits. And as of 22, reporting from FreightWaves and Forbes announced that those were being delivered at scale as of 2022. So as of right now, that initial kit is basically just a data collection kit. The other, the more advanced kit is like basically the level 4 system. So in the 3 years I've been following this, there is zero reporting. There's no data out there whatsoever about what the status of that program is. And as of 2021, I believe Plus said that they have 10,000 orders for that system or internationally, and 1,000 of those are from Amazon. But since then, it's radio silence. There's nothing. I have no idea how many of those systems are out there. I did come across some information recently about where they're currently operating at, which I can't divulge right now. But that's the 800-pound gorilla in the room. You know, Amazon chose that company over Aurora, which is currently seen as the industry leader, and that says something. So, you know, like we're all worried about, you know, migrant drivers and stuff like that right now. But give it a year, 2 years, we're going to be having a whole different conversation about all this.
Right.
I have a little experience with Plus. So
2
years ago at one of the Freightways events, they were offering anybody in attendance a chance to do a ride-along inside of their level 2 autonomous truck from Plus AI. And about a month before the event, they'd reached out to me as a Freightways employee, and they said, "Hey, we hear you have a CDL. Do you have a valid medical as well?" And I said, "Yep." And they said, "How would you like to drive the truck?" And I said, "Absolutely." And so it was their level 2 autonomous platform, but they said the way the system works is they could run it level 4 or 5, you know, whatever the equivalent is, if they so chose to. They don't because of the regulations that we have here in the U.S. But they collect all the data that those trucks are accumulating, and then they beam it overseas to China, where they're doing all of their level 4 and level 5 autonomy over there. But the way they described to me I believe the reason why Amazon went with them versus Aurora is Aurora. It's a much bigger system that they have to like bolt onto the truck, and like you can see like the sensors are like all over the place. It's really not a nice looking system. Whereas the system with Aurora, it's literally just an extra sensor bar on the bumper of the truck, and then the West Coast mirrors are like an additional 5 inches taller because of the extra sensors they have there. And they said they can install that in a truck and have it running within 8 hours, which is nothing. And they said it works on any modern truck with a diagnostic system and the lane control. But yeah, the whole time I was driving that truck, it basically felt like driving a big minivan. It has the lane detection, collision avoidance, and all that. And they asked me who I thought would be a good fit for this. And I don't know if they like my answer. I told them somebody with zero experience or somebody with decades of experience that just wants to ride out their last years in comfort would be perfect for this. The last person you want in a system like this is somebody with 6 months to 2 years experience, because now you're kneecapping that person at the level of everything the truck does for them. And that's not what you want to do if you're going from that company that has that truck to another one, because now you're basically starting at square zero. But yeah, I really haven't heard much from Plus. It was real nice chatting with them, and I kind of learned the revolving door there. So a lot of their executive level guys are from the FMCSA. They recently got rid of Wiley, and they brought this new guy on who was the number 1 or number 2 at the FMCSA 2 terms ago. So that seems to be where they're heading now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sorry, just to I don't want to go like too far down the autonomous rabbit hole or whatever, but like the big thing between Plus and Aurora is that Plus is going for real world data by delivering that stuff at scale. Aurora is basically the lion's share of all their data is basically video games, like simulation testing. So that's the biggest differentiating factor between those two companies. You have real world data, which is infinitely better than any sort of simulation that you can get. And that's, if I would have to guess, that's why Amazon went with them over Aurora. But anyways, all
right. Well, I think James, like something you and Will have mentioned is that, the issue with the sort of migrants and refugees and in-sourced labor into trucking is that that's the sort of test run, right? Like if they can get away with doing that, it'll make it easier to justify using autonomous trucks. The more cynical amongst us will see that they're going to use safety against us, right? They're going to say, oh, look at all the increased accidents and look at all the increased collisions and fatalities. We must have these autonomous vehicles, even though they're not a proven technology yet. And at the end of the day, the people getting kicked in the nuts is us, is truckers on the road. And so I think that's like sort of useful to have in the back of our heads, like what we're seeing now with the insourcing of labor, we're going to see again when the autonomous technology comes online. I'm going to bring it back to the executive order and something I said at the end of the show Shannon and I were on earlier. And so this just happened, right? And in time, already the media is starting to do their thing. Obviously, there's pro and con. They had Breitbart had a op-ed directly from Secretary Duffy, but pretty soon, the big guns are going to come out fighting this. And we've mentioned drivers from Mexico, drivers from Canada, and the sort of implications of this executive order and the enforcement of English to have a CDL, because we have, I'm going to set aside Mexico because I don't know too much about that side of the business. But coming from Canada, a lot of drivers in Canada don't speak English, and I'm not just talking about the usual guys from Quebec, right? The Frenchmen typically, they run into Ontario, they run into the Maritimes. They grew up in a country where the federal government and the dominant language is English, and most of those guys can get by, and they've never really been a problem. It's more the recent arrivals. Where there's an election in Canada right now. It's going on tonight, and the previous administration, hopefully they get voted out. The Liberal Party of Canada have had some pretty horrendous immigration policy. And then there's been a lot of immigration scams, visa scams, temporary foreign workers, student visas, people on student visas allowed to work. A lot of these people got into the trucking business. And to my mind, I think Trump's going to end up having an international problem on his hands because, whatever government wins the election in Canada tonight, they're going to have their own trucking association in their ear, like the Canadian Trucking Alliance, BC Trucking Association, Ontario Trucking Association, and all the mega carriers up there are going to be complaining about this, saying, well, a certain percentage of our drivers are not going to pass the English proficiency test, and boo-hoo. And I think, the Trump administration and people who support this executive order need to continue hammering on the safety and tell these carriers in Canada and the Canadian trucking associations to pound sand. Just as people in the United States can take an English as a second language course and do right by federal regulations here, so too can drivers from north of the border. And over and above the Canadian politics getting involved in this, we're going to have our own domestic sort of enemies, as it were. Because I bet your bottom dollar, organizations like the American Civil Liberties Union and other people on the other side of the fence are going to, do their usual bleeding heart. What about the migrants? What about the refugees? What about these immigrants? And it's like, well, go learn English. Is it that hard to ask people to learn the language before they go get a CDL? Right? Like, what do you guys think about this?
I think we should tell them to pound the table. Like you said, pound sand, pound the table, whatever it is. But I'm thankful that we have an administration that's not going to be impacted by their emotions, And so we talk a lot about the Canada situation, the reciprocity with Canada. When we started working on this stuff and we filed HB 1569, we started hearing a lot. There were some Canadian carriers that were calling down into our state Department of Transportation. They were calling the state trucking association, and they're saying, why are y'all making this law against us? And the problem that we have with Canada has nothing to do with Canadians. The problem we have with Canada is the government is so out of control up there that they're issuing these CDLs and they're issuing these visas to all of these drivers from Asia and around the world, and we're not getting reciprocity with Canadians. We're getting reciprocity with the rest of the world. And so until Canada starts controlling their licensing system, until Canada stops truck drivers from abusing the visitor visa system, then absolutely I call for a complete stoppage of the trade between drivers with Canada and the United States beyond commercial trade zones until Canada can get their house in order. It's not our responsibility to clean all of that up. They should be held to account and be responsible for making sure that they're sending us what they agreed to send, which includes the requirement for them to speak English. If Canada was to make a requirement that we're to speak French, then I'm sure that that would be enforced, and we would have to do that to come up there. But I think the reality is you don't have a lot of American drivers going up there because we can't compete, and this is a good conversation for us to have. I know that none are going to Mexico because we can't compete. I do know that some in the niches are going into Canada and are involved in that. But when it comes to drive-in and reefer, I think we would all have to agree that most of those jobs are dominated by the new Canadians.
Right. Typically, so before, when I say typically, I mean in the before times before Justin Trudeau showed up, north-south traffic going in and out of Canada, usually it was most of the loads going into Canada, 70 to 80% of that traffic was backhauls. Canadian guys took stuff south, then they took stuff back north. Then there was some American carriers that did come into Canada. You know, Justin used to work for Schneider. They had a big presence in Canada. I have a
lot of respect for a great carrier up there. His name is Ron Verspeten Cartage. He has the green trucks. You're probably familiar with him, Gordon.
Oh yeah, yep.
He and I used to compete a lot in the automotive space. Great guy, great business. I'm sure he sends Canadians.
Yeah, no, Verspeten, those we used to call them the Dutchmen. There's a lot of Dutch migration to Canada after World War II. Tons of those guys in Southern Ontario. Lots of Dutch truckers, but I mean, you know, we're talking second, third generation now. And Verspeten was one of their sort of main carriers. Good guys, but like I say, prior to Trudeau and prior to the, you know, influx of the just the ridiculous levels of immigration, and then the scamming that went on under the Trudeau government with the temporary foreign worker permits, like you say, typically that traffic was guys sort of legacy Canadian carriers, and now it's not like that anymore.
Yeah, and so I believe that there needs to be some kind of a level playing field there where it's not completely dominated by these new groups of drivers.
Right. Yeah. And as you say, they need to clean their house up north. And like I say, I'm from Canada, but in my research, it's just ridiculous. You can go and get your Class 1. So in Western Canada, a CDL is called a Class 1. In Ontario, it's called a Class AZ. I can't remember what they call them in Quebec, but in British Columbia, in Ontario, in Alberta, in Manitoba, in those 4 provinces, you can go and do all your theory tests in Punjabi, Mandarin, whatever language you want. It doesn't have to be in English. And then they say, oh, by the way, when you do your road test, you have to do it in English. Well, okay, cool. So you did everything up to that point in your own language, and then all of a sudden you magically learned English. So, I mean, the CBC, the Communist Broadcasting Corporation of Canada, who are like Trudeau fart sniffers, directly subsidized by the government, propagandists. You're almost never going to hear the truth out of them. Several months ago, their own investigative report show, one of them's called Marketplace, and they investigated all these dodgy ass truck driving schools from Brampton. Everybody knows the Brampton trucker meme, right? So even when the CBC, the government's paid propaganda organ that are not going to tell you the truth, even those guys knew what was up, and several months ago did a special on this about the crooked nature of how truck licenses are issued in Canada. And I think when President Trump gets pushback from the Canadian authorities about this, he should just turn it right back around on them. And as you say, Shannon, clean up your own mess first, and then we'll worry about it, you know? Anybody else got anything to add? Is there any questions from the chat? What's going on out there?
So speaking of Canada, when I was at Schneider, I used to run on a dedicated account called Aurora, and it was all the trailer parts out of Wabash. So Wabash National makes the trailers, and then Aurora is like who manufactures the parts for Wabash trailers. And one of the spurs on all the different dedicated routes they had was this really long leg into Canada. And I did this trip twice where you pick up a trailer preloaded out of Indianapolis, you go into Canada, and it was, I think, 7 or 9 stops on this thing. I basically just went straight up all the way to the Northeast, all the way into Quebec. And I've been to Ontario plenty of times, I had no problem. But the 2 days that I was in Quebec, I was like, I gotta get the hell out of here. There is no English up there; it's all French. And so you're looking at the road signs, and you're like, okay, north is north and south is south. So you kind of, the languages are pretty similar, so you can kind of sort of figure that out. But just the 2 days I was up there, I was like, I can't be doing this. And so all these guys that are down here constantly, with the way the road signs and everything are today, I couldn't imagine anyone being
Right.
comfortable behind the wheel doing that.
So we have a question from the chat. Our good friend from Freight Waves, Grace Sharkey.
Yes.
Her question is, anyone know if, based on the EO's wording, there is now no proficiency in place? I think what she means is that the so the English proficiency requirements are a federal regulation, right? They have always been there. They haven't been removed. They were simply waived. And in the wording of the executive order, Trump is directing DOT and thus the FMCSA to overturn the memorandum that waived that. So I don't think the English proficiency requirements have always been there, but the enforcement of them to place drivers out of service who failed the proficiency test was waived in 2016. And I believe the wording in the executive order is very specific, is to overturn that waiver and to direct enforcement officials to place those drivers out of service. I think it was very specific.
I've got it pulled up here, and it says to rescind the guidance, which was the guidance to stand down, and then to issue new guidance to the FMCSA and enforcement personnel outlining revised inspection procedures necessary to ensure compliance. And so to that point, I believe you will find that they are going to have a new standard, a new kind of testing that's probably rolled out and standardized, I would imagine, across all of the states, and everybody's kind of doing it the same way. So I think everybody's going to see something new.
I'm glad this is happening at the federal level, because as we saw with your guys' fight in Arkansas, even if you manage to get anything passed, it's a slap on the wrist. A $500 fine for failing the English language proficiency isn't a punishment. It's just, this is the cost of having to run your truck through Arkansas. And I just couldn't imagine that exact battle being fought out state after state after state. So what's nice about this being done at the federal level is it's just, okay, now everybody's on the same playing field.
I think it's actually easier, though, because one of the problems that we have with the out-of-service regulation is, what does the officer do with the driver when he puts him out of service? A lot of times when the driver leaves, I don't know how experienced you guys are dealing with these truck drivers, but when the officer leaves the scene and the guy, he says, hey, you be a good boy and you sit here, you're out of service, go sit in the parking lot. As soon as the officer's out of sight, what's to prevent the driver from leaving? And so that's why in the legislation that we introduced in Arkansas, and also the legislation that you're seeing in Oklahoma, it says impound the truck, because an officer doesn't want to have to sit there and babysit the vehicle and have this headache now of, I've got this out of service driver. What do I do with him? Because now this carrier is going to have to bring in another driver and manage all of that. The impound solution lets the officer immediately get the vehicle off the side of the road, get it into an impound yard, and then let the trucking company deal with the driver. The officer can leave the driver at the truck stop. And so I think the impound part is a very necessary function that these officers are going to need to prevent having to have this babysitting problem rise up when they start putting all these guys out of service. And so we're going to continue to be pushing for that impound on the state level. We're going to continue to push on it with these guys. It sucks that it's not in this executive order, but I think it's essential that not only is the guy put out of service, but what do you do with him when you put him out of service? And
I would imagine it's different than when a driver today is placed out of service due to hours. I've never been placed out of service. I've been pretty blessed throughout my career. But I would think it's just like anytime you get pulled into a way station and they put you out of service on the spot, either your carrier is going to have to bring you another driver, or what's also interesting is, what do they do with these single truck carriers where the driver is also the owner of the carrier and they can't speak English.
Yeah, he's just done.
It's going
You know,
to be up to the broker to figure out how to cover that load.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think this leads into something someone here asked, the methods they're going to enforce this. And someone else here named Matt is how this will affect rates. So I think the enforcement question is a good one. And it's going to take time, right? Like what'll end up happening is this executive order goes out and then DOT and FMCSA will clarify some stuff and then they'll start enforcing it. And it's going to take time for the people that are going to be affected by this, the companies, owner operators, that to see and to hear that, right? Like, so if let's say if you're out there trucking already and you already don't communicate in English, right? You're probably not reading Twitter. You're not reading OIDA's newsletter. You're not reading the newspaper. You're not reading the news. And this is part of the problem because that means you're also not reading weather reports. You're also not reading your daily inspection you're supposed to fill out. You're not reading the road signs. This is the whole problem. So it's going to take time for a bunch of these guys to get busted. And then in their own communities, in their own ethnic communities, and in their own language, they'll start telling their friends, holy cow, the gringos mean business about this. We have to speak English. And then in time, that gets back to their employers, to their own load broker networks, to their communities. That's like, oh, shoot, we have to speak English now. And then they'll either figure out, I mean, some of them might just keep going and take the risk of getting caught. I mean, that's a method of dealing with this. But then, it's going to take time for those carriers to sort of exit and or update their English. Like maybe some of them will go take an English as a second language course and try and do right by this regulation. But I think it's going to take a little bit of time before we start seeing a noticeable effect on rates and a noticeable effect on safety statistics and stuff like that. There's another question here I wanted to get to that's tied in with this from someone named Rebecca Sweeney. And she says there's so much more to it than just the language barrier. And she's correct. So something I harp on about is driving culture, right? People like to complain about safety and accidents, and they do happen. But if you actually look at the statistics, when you measure incidents, collisions, things that happen on the road per the number of miles traveled, right? So there was a study done looking at National Highway Traffic Safety Administration statistics of all these incidents laid out against the number of miles American car and truck drivers travel. And it was something like human drivers are already 99.9999% safe. When you think about it, the number of miles traveled against the number of incidents, right? And that is achieved in part because we have, it might not seem like it some days because there are assholes and there is bad driving behavior. We all see it. But for the most part, we are pretty good drivers and we get along. There's like a convivial, cooperative driving culture. I mean, it's starting to go away, and that's what we're trying to fight here. That's what we're trying to conserve. But we get along. We give each other the lights when we're passing each other. You get to an intersection that's ambiguous about who has the right of way. You wave someone through. You see a truck trying to pull out of a business onto the road or into a business. You slow down, let them go. There's sort of a cooperative driving culture here, and you cannot learn that cooperative driving culture when you just showed up. Even after you take the best CDL safety course and you take 6 months, it takes a long time to learn that. And you do not have that driving culture built into your head when you just showed up here, right? It's not even just about English. It's also about American and, to a lesser extent, Canadian driving culture, right? Do you guys agree with that?
100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had that video last year of the bus driver from India, and people who watch the video out of context, they just see some guy driving like a maniac, barreling down the streets of India in his truck full of passengers. The original person who uploaded that video onto YouTube posted it as bragging how good of a driver and how skilled this guy was in India. And so when I posted that, I said, I do not want this guy and his cousins driving large vehicles here in the States. And people lost their minds. But it's just a perfect example of different people from different areas of the world have different cultures and attitudes when it comes to how they drive.
Right. Yeah. I had a guy on. I'm gonna toot my own podcast again here. A couple episodes ago, I interviewed a gentleman by the name of Andy Roberts, and he's the proprietor of one of Canada's oldest truck driving schools. I wanted to get somebody on who's doing things correctly, who's well regarded in the industry, because like we all like to complain about the bad drivers and the lack of training. So I brought on a good guy, and he made a very interesting observation because he teaches a lot of drivers from Jamaica. And so he went to Jamaica. He went and traveled there. And, Jamaica's a big island and it's got lots of trucks on it like anywhere else. But the roads are super narrow and they've got like these bauxite mines in the middle of the island. And these guys haul in and out of these mines and they kind of drive a little bit like maniacs. And because the roads are narrow, they get like super tight and close to each other. And so what this Andy guy was saying is like in North America, how those guys drive, that's considered a near miss. You might like get right close to each other. You might even ding mirrors. And to the Jamaicans, that's not a big deal because that's how they drive there. They don't necessarily get in accidents, but it looks wild because the roads are so narrow. But they come and drive here like that, and they scare the crap out of people. And if you're an enforcement official, that's a near miss. That's dangerous driving. You're going to get a citation. So, like, again, driving cultures in different parts of the world are different. When you come here, it should just be like a sign of respect to drive to the standards of North America.
So one of the questions that we got is, what does this mean for the states that offer the CDL exam in multiple languages? Most Northeastern offering it at least 5 different languages. What's interesting is the rescission, where in the executive order it says to rescind the guidance document entitled English Language Proficiency Testing and Enforcement. And so the memorandum that was issued was on both testing and enforcement. So when they rescind that memo, it will affect both testing and enforcement. And there will be new guidelines then issued on both of those areas. So yes, I believe it will affect that, and I'm praying that based on the president's guidance here, that they will only be able to test in English as well. That would be the expectation.
It never should have been otherwise to begin with. I can't imagine the thinking behind somebody who is willing to put somebody through a test like that and then give them the responsibility of driving a large vehicle on the highways. Like nobody ever thinks like, oh crap, my family shares the road with these people.
All right, James, you had a question?
Yeah, so I just got back from a documentary shoot in Texas and haven't had the chance to read over everything yet here. But are there any provisions within this executive order that also hold carriers accountable for violating labor laws? Because, like, I think, like even with my aviation background and everything, like the language of aviation is English because everyone, in an airplane needs to be able to communicate with every other airplane sort of thing. So I think there's a very valid argument for all of this. But if we're only going to be going after, the bottom end or like the non-domiciled CDL holders and, migrant drivers and all that kind of stuff, but we're not going after the people that are blatantly violating labor laws by hiring and breaking those laws to get cheaper labor and stuff. We're kind of addressing one thing, but we're not, addressing the pull factors that are bringing them over there. And, every one of these carriers out there, they all want cheap labor. Is there anything within this that addresses that issue, or is that maybe coming down later down the road?
There's not, and that's our hope is that the administration, especially Secretary Duffy's office, is not finished. It says here that he's going to review the non-domiciled CDLs and any unusual patterns or numbers or irregularities. I would consider labor dumping to be an irregularity.
Yeah.
But I don't see anything in here specifically saying that he's going to, take a task force and go after that stuff. And so I do hope and pray that he's going to continue to look at this issue, because look, if this is all we get done, this is a win for public safety, but it does not fix the economic dynamics that are going on right now for the American truck driver or the American trucking industry. Because even though you're placing a driver out of service, we've got to catch them, and that takes time, and there's a tail on that enforcement. And we believe, as we've stated before, that they have dumped in thousands upon thousands of drivers through these different vehicles into the system. And so every one of us, all of the truck drivers and all of the carriers, we're going to suffer the consequences of that until someone takes decisive action to revoke and ban the non-domiciled CDLs and to limit the number of CDLs that can be issued and that are allowed to cross our border, whether that's from Canada or the United States or Mexico. I'm sorry.
I want to add something to this real quick too, on James's question. Yeah, I see that too. People want to know, hey, are we gonna deal with the companies that engage in these bad labor practices? Are we gonna haul some CEOs before some board? Are we gonna cancel some companies? And one of the things about this particular issue with in-source labor, migrants behind the wheel, is more often than not, they're working for their co-ethnic homeboys. They're working for a small company that's just one guy that got here before they did. Oftentimes they've got some kind of work authorization, but they know the language and culture from home, and they encourage their homeboys to come here and work. And then those guys set them up, and they're often small carriers, right? This is the problem with Amazon, is Amazon's using all these. And because Amazon's got this separation, they've got plausible deniability to say it's not their problem. It's hard to hook this on the man or some big company. And as Shannon was saying on the podcast we did together a couple months ago, there's now 2 parallel trucking economies in the United States. And paradoxically, the most members of the American Trucking Association, all these big carriers, often enough don't employ any of these people. They just encourage it, because at the other end of the market, these smaller carriers then make it more difficult for the medium and family-sized companies that compete against the ATA on service but can't on cost. So the ATA encourages all this crap, but they're not the ones actually employing these people most of the time.
So looking at the executive order, if there was going to be anything they could do for that, it would be on Section 5. It says, Section 5, supporting America's truck drivers. Within 60 days of the date of this order, the Secretary of Transportation shall identify and begin carrying out additional administrative, regulatory, or enforcement actions to improve the working conditions of America's truck drivers. So I'd say within the next 60 days, if Secretary Duffy doesn't have anything actionable that he's put out, then we can start beating the drums again.
No, that's a good catch. I keep overlooking. I read that earlier, but I keep overlooking that paragraph, and it's an important paragraph. I think that's that's a promise by Secretary Duffy. This isn't everything. We're not done.
Right. I think James has another question.
Oh, yeah, that might have just answered it. But yeah, the only other caveat that I would say is my home state is Iowa, and everything. It's there's no. They just reduced the their. Sorry, let me collect my thoughts. I still haven't recovered from the documentary shoot, but yeah, they keep finding 12-year-olds out and working night shifts in slaughterhouses on my home state, with 30 miles where my parents live and everything. And it's if there's not enforcement on the higher end side of things with those companies, they're just going to keep pulling in the cheap labor and pulling people in, chewing them up and spitting them out. Because yeah, at the end of the day, there's not enough risk and there's not enough punitive consequences for those companies if they're not being held accountable. So yeah, that was just a follow up on that.
I think that's the one differentiator in trucking versus manufacturing. Yeah. In that, we've given this analogy before that if you're working in a factory and you make a mistake and your hand slips on the belt or whatever, you cut your arm off because it gets caught on the conveyor belt. You hurt yourself, but you don't hurt a bunch of people around you. And so, but the problem with driving an 80,000 pound vehicle when you're untrained and you're unqualified is when you make a mistake, it's typically the other people that get hurt and it's the other people that get killed. And in most of the accidents accidents that I've managed or that I've been involved in with my own fleet, the drivers are typically okay. It's the people that they had the accident with that weren't. And so I believe they messed up by trying to do what they've been doing with manufacturing in the trucking industry and overlooking the fact that, hey, this is a dangerous job, that people are going to care. People are going to start rising up and speaking out about this because, dads and moms and brothers and sisters are being killed on these highways, and the American people won't stand for it. And so what the American Trucking Association is seeing, this blowback that's coming back at them here, is that this isn't just a manufacturing job where when they bring in slave wages and dump them into a factory and they make a mistake, they hurt themselves. No, you try to dump a bunch of slave wages into the American trucking industry, you don't just affect the American truck driver, you affect everybody on the highways. And that's what's the difference is here.
No, that's extremely good point. Yeah.
Can we pull up Jamie Anderson's question?
Yeah, so even the guys at Free Caviar today, they tweeted out, Sergey's toast. This is not going to help unless Sergey can speak a little English. I think a lot of the companies that use these Eastern European refugee guys, they're going to be hurting.
I want to comment on this just because this just shows how big of a problem we have with brokers and their mentality towards the American truck driver when they laugh and joke and they send around these memes about strong solo Sergey and just what that means. Like, you're sitting there laughing about giving loads out to drivers who are unvetted, untrained, unqualified. You're calling him strong solo Sergey because he's going to run the load illegally. He's going to run straight through. He's going to run a 1,000-mile trip in 24 hours, and you're laughing about it. And so a part of the problem that we have is that we have given too much market share in our industry to a bunch of irresponsible college kids. And it's time to jerk their asses out of their seats and give them an ass whooping and take these lanes back and give them to our American truck drivers.
Right. Well, I mean, this follows with like what we were saying about, like, this is just the start. The English proficiency thing is just the start. There's all these other problems. And if like Trump and Duffy are willing to listen to us and like they're listening, they pulled the language right out of what you guys have been saying. So the next step is, okay, how do we make this better for American truck drivers? And, the brokers is a component of it. And one of the things Justin's always been saying is, maybe load brokers need to have a TWIC card as well, because that means at least they're in the U.S. Because a lot of the, and then freight fraud ties into this. So we've got offshore brokers who don't care, and they're taking their rip, and they're pushing the strong solo Sergey thing. And then the freight fraud typically emanates from those communities as well. So like this is the next step. After we got to keep pushing forward with this stuff.
And so I say we ban these non-domiciles. I say we limit these foreign CDLs. And if we can't get that, we jerk the immunity off of TQL. We jerk the immunity off of all these brokers, and we allow these lawyers to penetrate their corporate veils. We allow the lawyers to go after the brokers who are facilitating the use of all of these illegal truck drivers. And that'll put a stop to it. You let TQL get hit in the mouth for $200 million. You let C.H. Robinson or some of these other guys be held responsible for endangering the lives on America's highways by punching them in the mouth. That's what you do. And so either you ban the CDLs or you pull down the curtains on the brokers.
Yeah, so
Something I think you got to realize too, the meme or the idea behind strong solo Sergey is you have to laugh at something like that. Otherwise, you're just driving yourself insane because you, as the broker, you just want your stuff delivered there intact and on time. And somebody like a strong solo Sergey is the it's like the bullshit that you got to deal with when it comes to just getting anything delivered. Somebody ripping. When I talk to guys that have to deal with people like this, it just blew me away because the kind of freight that I was hauling, if I tried anything sneaky like that, I'd be in git mode right now. But the idea of hauling 8 loads of slot machines and consolidating them all into one trailer and then putting that on the rail and pocketing the rest. That is just so like having the idea of even doing that is like so alien to me. But I just think part of where these guys are coming from is just that's just hey that man that's just the cost of doing business.
If they were taking action to limit sourcing loads to a bunch of illegal truck drivers, they might have an argument that that is just some kind of a fun meme. But the fact that they continue to give these loads to all of these drivers day in and day out so they can get their $100 or $200 a load is egregious, outrageous, and unacceptable. And so for that reason, I don't find it funny at all.
I'm also surprised like the receivers on the other end never really put the foot down. Like if I was the customer on the other end receiving say like slot machines, and I had any suspicion that that load was tampered with, I'm suing everybody. But it's even the shippers or the receivers are just kind of shrugging their shoulders at it and saying, hey, as long as you know all the pieces arrive, it is what it is.
Well, it's because all of these guys feel like they have created this rate agreement language, this broker carrier agreement language, this shipper contract language that has created a buffer for them, and that's what we need our Secretary of Transportation. That's what we need our president. Either get the guys off the road or pull the curtains off of these guys so that they can be held responsible for what they're doing.
Yeah, I don't think enough people that have watched how the sausage is made are in the like higher levels of government, and I think just having if Sean Duffy wants to show up at a Freightways event this year, there will be 100 people willing to talk his ears off and just tell him the horror stories of how freight actually gets moved in the country. I think that would be a really educational experience for him.
And before any brokers get to give us any input, they need to send us their tenders and let us know who they've been brokering their loads to.
Mm-hmm.
Hey Pedro, are you still going back there? Pedro, Hunter, have you guys got anything to say? This is your platform, guys.
No, this is the Gordon McGill show.
Voice of Gord.
You're too kind. No, I mean you guys are in the business too, right? Like you must have some thoughts on all this.
No, I mean I think it's a good push in the right direction. We were actually talking to the Kentucky State Patrol about this at Matt's. You know, just like Arkansas, kind of being the first state to really implement this. You know, pass of if you can't speak English, you shouldn't be driving with the CDL. And I mean, if you can't read a sign, for a bridge that has a low overpass or traffic ahead, like that's you're just putting more people in danger. So, I mean, I'm no expert on this. I haven't been behind the wheel, but I know enough to where hearing the people, like gathering. I mean, shit, we have 600 people watching right now, listening. I mean, dude, it's a good start. So, I don't want to jump on ego either. That's
throw Lombard's comment up there. That's hilarious.
Yeah, no, it's great. But yeah, learned a lot. Shannon. Man, I'll talk to Sean.
Get him, Michael.
Congratulations on two-time Ironman champion Mike Lombard there.
And meeting RFK. Maybe that's how all this information got passed.
Did he really?
Yeah, that's probably the secret right there. Is he ran next to RFK.
Yeah, Lombard was in the elevator at his hotel, and I guess RFK's son was staying there as well. He competed in the Ironman in the open division, and the elevator door opens up, and boom, right in his face is RFK Jr.
Lombard needs a camera team following him around.
I'm telling you. There's a couple of guys you meet at Mass, and you're like, damn, I wish those people were like surveilled 24/7 because Lombard's a good one. Larry Cothrane's a good one. Endless entertainment. No, what people need to listen to is the voice messages Gord leaves me in the mornings when he hasn't cleared his throat out yet. They think his voice is gravelly. They need to hear him in the morning.
Yeah, thank God for Signal, and I use that too when I'm driving around, so I'm not typing. Yeah, well, hey guys, any more closing thoughts? I want to be respectful of everyone's time here. It's pushing 10:30. I'm not quite sure there's much more to say about this. I think we covered quite a bit. Any further questions or commentary?
Right now, it's standby to stand
By he's got 60 days to really put an action plan forward, and we'll see whether this stuff has teeth.
Shannon?
Man, I just want to just have a good night's sleep here and just celebrate this win today. I'm just so excited for our industry that our prayers got answered. I'm thankful. There was a lot of prayer warriors really praying about this, and so I think what everybody really got to see here was a miracle.
Yeah, praise the Lord for that one. James?
I'm just kind of along for the ride. I'm kind of sat in on this to do a little bit more research because I'm trying to find a decent angle for another episode to follow up on the autonomous trucking thing that I'm working on right now. So, but I definitely appreciate the time. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it, sir. I know you've been very busy with travel and you only just got home last night. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Oh man, the comments section. Never read the comments section.
Oh shit, there's a comment section. I haven't looked in there yet.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it's always good to have haters. They bring spice and color to things. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for joining us. To all the listeners on Twitter and LinkedIn and YouTube and various platforms that tuned in. We appreciate you coming to hang out with us. Pretty interesting news today. I hope you found some of our discussion here clarifying and helpful. And follow all these guys, Pedro and Hunter at the Logistics Lounge. Thanks for having us. They run a tight ship. They always have lots of good discussions. Follow Super Trucker for memes and high quality intel. Go to James Year's website, jamesyear.com and stealingfire.tech to see his photojournalism work where it regards the perceived replacement of American truck drivers with robots. And if you're a truck driver listening to this or just somebody that cares about these issues, head over to Shannon's website, americantruckers.com, and you can sign up to get updates and be a member. It's totally free. And then that way, more numbers and more pressure we can apply to the government and pull them more towards what drivers and motorists in America need.
Right on. Thank you, Gordon. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.
The views and opinions expressed on this show by its guests are not necessarily those of Lounge Media Group or the show host. So if you sue someone, make sure it's the party responsible for hurting your feelings. Also, grow up, be an adult, and understand not everyone thinks like you. And that's okay.